June 19, 1944. Philippine Sea. The morning sun blistered through the haze above the seemingly endless blue. Below, the U.S. Navy's Task Force 58 lay across the Pacific Steel Islands whose surrounding calm waters concealed chaos below. On the deck of the USS Lexington, the air vibrated with heat and noise as crews readied lines of dark blue fighters Grumman F6F Hellcats for launch. Engines coughed, burst into life, and whirled propellers into circles of blur. Fuel, salt, and burning oil blended into a one-edged perfume of war. Pilots took their places in cockpits, some still boys scarcely 20, their faces obscured behind goggles, their minds quick with routine and terror. Far to the west, Japanese radar controllers on Admiral Azao's carriers were tracking them already. Optimistic voices reverberated in the control rooms. Messages about enemy planes approaching were not greeted with concern but with derision. AHH, the American turtles once more, one pilot quipped, buckling into his Mitsubishi A6M Zero. Too heavy to rise, too slow to turn. Piece of cake. The Japanese referred to Grumman aircraft as flying barrels, ugly, cumbersome, and unable to keep up with the graceful Zero. For years, this had been the case. Early in the Pacific War, Zeros dominated the skies, playing tag with lumbering wildcats and launching fire plumes into the sea. This time, the pilots made a mistake. As the initial wave of Japanese planes ascended toward the sun, they had yet to realize they were heading into the jaws of a new beast, one hammered into being in the fire pits of Long Island, designed not for style, but for survival. The F6F Hellcat was no fashion plate, it was a pugilist. Its wings could roll with a fusillade of bullets. Its 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine could pull it through hell and back. The American pilots who commanded her had learned a lesson from 2 years of embarrassment, and now they were ready to take back the Pacific. Hellcats, you are cleared for takeoff, was the command from the deck officer. Lieutenant Alex Vraciu clenched his hand around the throttle. Let's give them an idea of what the Iron Works constructed for us, he growled. He shoved ahead. The motor howled, the tail came up, and in a deafening whoosh, the Hellcat sprang off the deck into the bright, unmerciful air. High over the blue horizon, a new type of war was set to start, one that would shatter once and for all the myth of Japanese air supremacy. Well before that fiery June day above the Philippine Sea, it all started in the cold factories of Bethpage, Long Island, where Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation had its base. It was 1942. The Pacific War was not going well for America. News from Midway and the Coral Sea was bitter reminders of Japanese air supremacy. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero was unchallenged, quick, lethal, and manned by pilots who had years of experience. American pilots in the squat F4F Wildcats were dying in large numbers. Within Grumman's plant, the engineers labored beneath stuttering lamps that burned late into the night. They were called the Iron Works because their planes, in contrast to the breakable Japanese planes, were constructed to withstand punishment. The founder of the company, Leroy Grumman, a veteran Navy pilot himself, had one credo: build it tough, build it simple, build it to get the pilot home. Chief Engineer William Schwendler sketched the first outline of what would be the F6F Hellcat on a drafting sheet still oily from being wiped clean with a smudge of grease. It seemed fat, blocky even with a gigantic radial engine and heavy armor plating. When the Navy was presented with the design, they were reluctant. "It's too heavy," one officer complained. "The Zero will fly circles around it." But Grumman's pilots had other ideas. They didn't care about dancing with the enemy, they wanted to strike like a hammer. The Hellcat's enormous Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine could provide well over 2,000 horsepower. Its 6 Browning .50 caliber machine guns fired 450 rounds of ammunition per gun. It could dive, climb, and take punishment that would tear a Zero apart in seconds. The initial prototype, XF6F1, flew on June 26, 1942. It was clumsy but full of potential. The breakthrough actually occurred when test pilot Corky Meyer settled into the improved XF6F3 powered by the double WASP engine. Leveling out over Long Island Sound, he shoved the throttle ahead and the plane leaped forward like a living creature. It seemed unstoppable, he recalled later. You could sense it wanted to fight. In months, production lines thundered. The Iron Works became a city of metal and fire. Thousands of women and men machinists, riveters, welders assembled Hellcats around the clock in shifts. On one worker's apron was the inscription, "Every rivet a bullet for freedom." In August 1943, Hellcat squadrons began boarding U.S. carriers for the Central Pacific. Surviving Wildcat pilots stepped into these new birds and grinned. "This one's for payback," one remarked before liftoff. Even sooner, the glee of Japanese pilots would be replaced by shock. November 23, 1943. South Pacific. Across the seas off Tarawa, the first Hellcat squadrons were released. The air over the atoll vibrated in the tropic heat. The American invasion force below battered the coral reef with shell fire, but the sky was Japanese, or so they believed. From the flight decks of the USS Essex, a new sound thrummed in the air as F6F Hellcats pushed into the air to meet a group of Zeros coming in from the east. Flight leader was Lieutenant Butch O'Hare, Medal of Honor winner and one of the Navy's finest fighter aces. He was familiar with the Zero's ballet, its elegant turns, its thin-skinned armor. The Hellcat wasn't designed to pirouette. The Hellcat was designed to smash. "Stay up," O'Hare called in his steady voice. "Let them come to us." In moments, silver flashes crowded the sky, Japanese fighters swooping from the sun. The first pass was swift. Cannon shells whizzed past, etching white circles of death. But when the Zeros attempted to turn back, the Hellcats remained glued to their tails. The double WASP motors roared as American pilots throttled up as far as they could. There was a string of 6.50 calories from O'Hare's Hellcat. The tracers tracked across the sky and ripped through the fuselage of a Zero. Fire blazed out. One went down. Another. In a matter of minutes, the invincible Zeros were dropping into the ocean like blazing leaves. The Hellcat had done its job quick, tough, and lethal. Pilots radioed back in awe, "This devil of a thing climbs like a devil and dives like a stone and still brings you home." Crews on the Essex cheered as the first Hellcats returned, bullet holes on their wings but engines still roaring. Mechanics rushed to the planes, handling the charred metal as if it were holy. Word came from the Pacific quickly. The F6F Hellcat was not only an airplane, it was a message. America had finally produced a fighter that not only could outlast Japan's top but overpower them. By late 1943, the Hellcat had already scored hundreds of kills. Pilots started referring to it as the Ace Maker. But its real test and its mythic reputation would arrive a half-year later, in one of the biggest aerial battles the world had ever witnessed. June 19, 1944. Philippine Sea. The sun beat down on the U.S. carrier task force as radar scopes glowed like Christmas trees. Dozens of blips closed in from the West, Japan's final major carrier fleet, commanded by Admiral Azawa. Their quarry, the American invasion fleet off Saipan. On board the USS Lexington, pilots were already buckling in. Deck crews yelled above rumbling engines, steam catapults whistled, and ocean air trembled with energy. More than 200 Hellcats waited to protect the fleet, the greatest assembly of carrier-based fighters the world had ever known. "Bandits inbound, 200 miles out," echoed the controller's voice over the intercom. Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's highest-scoring ace, clicked his oxygen mask into place. "Let's go hunting, boys." Seconds later, Hellcats lifted in waves, engines roaring in unison. Climbing through clouds in layers, sunlight sparkled off their navy blue wings. Before them, dots materialized, hundreds of Japanese aircraft, Zeros, Vals, and Judas, leading bombers down on the fleet. The Japanese anticipated yet another facile victory. Much of their aircrew was green, one fluid, hardly trained. Their erstwhile elite veterans were gone, lost on Guadalcanal, Rabaul, and the Solomons. But they retained the hubris of early war years. "The Americans can't fight," a Zero pilot had declared before takeoff. "They produce machines, not men." He was mistaken. At 20,000 feet, the Hellcats dived. Machine guns boomed. The sky was filled with pandemonium, tracer fire blazing, planes twisting and crashing. A Japanese formation disintegrated at the first American strafing run. Hellcats ripped through enemy formations, killing bombers before they could reach the carriers. McCampbell and his wingman Ensign Roy Rushing shot down 15 planes by themselves that morning. Radio voices were full of shock. "Splash, another Zero. 2 more down. They're dropping like flies." Sailors from the decks below saw the sky become a lethal dance of sunlight and smoke. By noon, more than 350 Japanese planes had been shot down at a cost of only 15 US planes. The pilots sneered wryly as they came back to refuel. It wasn't a battle, it was a turkey shoot. The nickname stuck. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot became the emblem of absolute American air dominance. By the end of the day, Japan's naval air arm was broken. Its top flyers were dead, its carriers mere floating caskets. The Hellcat had achieved destiny, transforming mockery to terror. But the victory was not just for the pilots. Behind each Hellcat were thousands of invisible hands, the women and men of the Iron Works, whose sweat and steel worked the wings of victory. By the summer of 1945, Hellcat dominated the skies of the Pacific. From Okinawa to the Marianas, its throaty boom boomed across every island where the stars and stripes rose. Pilots loved it like a brother in arms, a gun that absorbed hits, flew on, and brought them home. On the chalkboards in the Enterprise and Yorktown ready rooms, there were victory tallies. Japan's ace pilots disappeared one by one from the boards. The F6F Hellcat had racked up an incredible statistic, 19-1. For each Hellcat shot down, 19 enemy aircraft dropped from the sky. There was no other fighter in history to equal that proportion of dominance in carrier warfare. Even the proud Japanese pilots, who had once sneered at it, acknowledged defeat. Seized pilot journals described dark blue demons planes which emerged out of nowhere, absorbed fire, and retaliated with ruthless accuracy. The success of Hellcat wasn't about performance alone. It was about philosophy, the Grumman philosophy. Leroy Grumman's firm never constructed for glory or speed for their own sake. They constructed for survival. They experimented with wings until they broke, then reinforced them. They made the landing gear fold up neatly into the fuselage, a minor innovation that saved innumerable takeoffs and landings. Each bolt, each panel was made with one purpose: to ensure the pilot lived to battle another day. In 1944, Grumman's employees, women who had traveled from home to serve the war, worked 12-hour shifts. They riveted, welded, and painted until their fingers blistered. They referred to the factory as the Iron Works, half in jest, half in pride. Each time a new Hellcat came out of the hangar, they'd touch the nose and whisper, "Bring him home." And it did. More than 12,000 Hellcats were produced, and of all the enemy planes downed by Navy pilots, more than 75% were credited to this one aircraft. And when Japan finally surrendered in August 1945, numerous Hellcats remained idle on the flight decks of carriers moored in Tokyo Bay. Wings folded, engines still. They'd done their job without glory, without flash, but with unshitterable dependability. Lieutenant Alex Vraciu, who had once flown away into that golden sky over the Philippine Sea, stood beside his plane for the last time. 6 enemy aircraft destroyed in 8 minutes, his record ranked among the best. He gazed over the battered fuselage, the chipped paint, the streaks of salt and oil, and smiled. "The ironworks made a fighter," he murmured. But what they really made was a legend. As the sun sank into the Pacific horizon, the Hellcat's shape radiated in the dying light, the war's unseen champion, forged of scorn, hardened by flames, and crowned with victory.